The Dark Knight's camera dolly movements, Wrecking for a Dream's fast-paced cuts, Jungle Fever's fearless stance on race. But there's something that's much more deep, much more personal that makes these movies great. The method acting.
Dear diary, what a day it's been. Dear diary, it's been just like a train.
When you're finding a character, you have to take on a new persona. You have to learn how to act, talk, walk, and even breathe as the character you're playing. Even your silent moments of contemplation are spent inside the character's mind. So how can one act out a person with depression who has an excessive amount of cortisol that's being sent to their brain? Or a mentally ill person who has a chemical imbalance in their mind? What about insomnia, anorexia, weight gain, cerebral palsy? How, as directors, do we get our actors to live and signal these livelinesses? I talked to one of my actors who is also a good friend of mine about a role he had to play in my upcoming film Scatterbrain. I asked him about what it was like to play the role of an isolated high schooler, the main character Wilson.
The influence that I used to get into that headspace was just general anxieties that I have about relationships and my future in general. Doing my best to intentionally beat myself up about those things. Not being aware of your body, moving all of my energy to my brain and processing everything in there. If there are physical things that happen, just kind of not even being aware of them to a certain degree, but not really paying them as much attention to as what is the sort of the things that I'm keeping in my head, like emotions that I'm doing unconsciously that are sort of cathartic, that'll release something. Even though it was really arduous and taxing, just difficult in general, I was still excited to be able to put myself in that position, to actually see if I can force myself to be like that. It was weird, so I was excited and also just but especially at the end of the day, I was exhausted. I was fried, my brain was fried. To get that much of mental energy, that's hard to keep up.
Robert De Niro put it as,
some are harder, some parts were harder but more rewarding in a certain way. Say, okay, Raging Bull. That's what I mean about conserving energy. You can conserve the energy to the moment that you have to do it, and then you do it, and then it's draining, maybe, but it's also satisfying.
and it's not just Robert De Niro that agrees with Wilson.
Character an actor takes on, they need to treat that person as if they were real, in order to feel the correct amount of responsibility for their existence, because your job is to create a real, live, breathing, full, rich, multifaceted, convoluted, complex person, and that's very difficult to do if you don't care about that person.
I call acting 3D anthropology.
When I read a script, I'm looking at pretty much two things. One is if the writer thought about the character and that the character could possibly exist outside of the script, as opposed to just being used as a pawn for a story.
Jesse Eisenberg brings up a good point. Method acting cannot just be used to play a pawn in a story. The motivation behind method acting has to be genuine. There was a movie that was made back in 1999 called Men on the Moon, where Jim Carrey starred Andy Kaufman. There's also a Netflix documentary that shows his method acting process throughout the film called Jim and Andy. In watching this, I got a sense that Jim Carrey, and even some of his co-stars around him on the film, were using method acting to merely express their own insecurities, which he does throughout the film, referring to himself in third person as Jim Carrey is scared. But also, and more detrimental, he uses method acting to make his co-stars uncomfortable and take the starlight for himself. So as directors and filmmakers and actors and even film watchers, we have to make sure our films are coming from the right place of motivation. That's something that I'm doing with my upcoming film Scatterbrain, and I'm working on getting better at, and I encourage those around me to as well. That's how we can use and not abuse method acting to create the best art possible.